All right, so this is going to be my thoughts on Unordinary. So, with that being said, let's just roll the intro.
The bad bitch like she average. I'm a savage, little hoe, what you want do? I'm about cash if the raw fast. I'ma get that little nigga by any means.
All right, so I'm going to basically talk about what I think about the series. First, I'm going to tell you what's it about, and then I'm going to say what I like and what I don't like about it. And you guys can disagree with me, or agree with me. So really, it's just my opinion. So it's not like complete fact. You shouldn't take it as such. So what is Unordinary about? Well, it's about this person named John who lives in this world with people that have superhuman abilities or powers, and he goes to this really prestigious school, and where it's supposed to be a top school in terms of academics, but also there is a lot of high tier people who have powers that also go there. So the power system works like this. So there is a scale from 1 through 10, 1 through 3, or 1 through 3 is around low tier. Anyone that's 3 and between 3 and 4, I believe, is mid tier, and anything that's around 5 to I think 6 is high tier, while anyone that's at 7 and above is at god tier. So at this point in the series, we haven't really seen anyone at 10. We've only, the highest that we've seen documented was at 8. John himself, the last time his was recorded, it was around a 7, but it could be higher since that was 2 or 3 years ago, so it could be higher from then. So like I said before, John goes to the school, and we are meant to believe that he has no powers. And you might be thinking to yourself, this sounds like a lot like My Hero Academia, but there's a little bit of a difference. Yes, the main character does not have a power within a world that's full of superpowered people. But the thing is that this world is not really focused on heroes at all, really. And the main character doesn't go to a school that's meant to train him to become a hero. In fact, the world that Unordinary takes place in doesn't really have this kind of concept of superheroes. That's why you see whenever they mention the word superhero, it's always in quotations. They're actually seen more as vigilantes than anything else, which is kind of weird, and I'll get to that when I get to what I don't like about it. But let me tell you more about the story. So we're meant to believe that that John is powerless, but at the same time, there's something off about him. He doesn't really follow the kind of hierarchy that the kind of school and society goes for, because him as a cripple, he's supposed to fear those that are stronger than him. And like I said before, cripples are those who don't have power in this universe. But there's something off because he doesn't really have fear of those stronger than him, and as well, he has this kind of dark kind of side to him that's reflected whenever he talks, because this is a webtoon, and because of that, it's all in full color. So the text, every character has a different color text, with the bubble being a certain color and the text itself being a different color. But John himself actually is the only one that has normal text colors, right? White bubble with black text, until he starts talking more aggressively, or more when he has that kind of different persona on, the colors reverse with a black bubble with white text. It's also shown visually with his kind of hairstyle, because when he's acting nice, his hair is kind of gelled back, but when he's kind of angry or aggressive, his hair is messy. And you see this kind of transition a lot through the early parts of the webtoon. So we are led to, it's implied at the beginning that he has some sort of dark past, and he doesn't really want to talk about it, and he's always having kind of flashbacks towards it. Well, he, in this kind of class, or in this kind of school that he goes to, he meets this really high tier girl. She's like the strongest at the school, and her name is Serafina, I think. That's her full name, but they just call her Sarah. And her power is time manipulation, I believe, so she could freeze, speed up, or slow down time, and things like that. So they have this kind of relationship, this kind of friendly relationship with each other, and she's kind of there to sometimes protect John, but John is that person who always kind of starts fights because he sees people getting bullied and he'll help, or he doesn't like back down to people when they make fun of him or things like that. So after this point, it'll go into spoilers. If you don't want to hear it, then I would suggest clicking off. But if you're already watching this, then you're probably already read through Unordinary or really far through it. So we do eventually find out that John has a power, and this power is very strong. And if you've seen my what if that could have John's powers, then you already know what it is. It's called aura manipulation. But like I said in that video, it's not your typical aura manipulation. It's actually more of a copy power. So how it works is that he's able to detect when people are nearby and if they're using their power or not. But the other side of his power is that he's able to copy other people's powers by just looking at them. But the downside to that is that the power has to have some sort of indicator or some sort of visual stimuli to it, or else he can't copy it. So he wouldn't be able to copy things like future vision, telepathy, or anything that's mental like that. So another part of his power is that whenever any power he copies, he's able to amplify it quite a bit. And also, he's only able to have 4 powers at a time, but he's able to basically combine them to make new powers and things like that. So in this kind of story, there would be no reason for John to use his powers, since he always has Sarah next to him. And the way that they wrote it, or the author wrote getting her out of the story, and John finally revealing his power, is very, very well done. When you have a character like John, John really reminds me of the 2019 Joker, if you've seen that film. But if you haven't, I'm going to spoil it a little bit. Not really too much, but I suggest go watching it. But yeah. So, when you have this character who's in a society that is kind of messed up and doesn't really, kind of shuns the main character, right? And if you want to make a character that kind of snaps, right? That like snaps and becomes violent in some sort of way, you have to make the things that happen to him kind of justifiable, right? But if you don't do that, it could end really badly, and your character is just getting kind of tortured for no reason. This is why things like John and Joker are sympathetical, because the things that happen to him are justified and make sense within that universe. When I mean justified, I don't mean like they deserve it, but I don't mean they deserve it, but what I mean is that it makes sense that it happens, right? So John basically doesn't follow the hierarchy, so the person in charge basically puts him in his place. This causes him to use his powers. It makes sense, right? He was able to be in that position because Sarah's not there, so it makes sense, right? They keep pushing him and pushing him and pushing him. Also, the fact that they could get him into this one point and ambush him, and then he finally unleashes his power, it makes sense, right? So I did see some trivia on the wiki page about John, and it was gonna say that the author originally wanted him to be powerless, right? But the problem with that is that when you have a character that's shunned by society, has no kind of outlet for that kind of anger, and you take the saving grace of his, the only saving grace in his life, and he's a high schooler, what you just wrote is basically like a school shooter, right? And I might get flack for that, but that's basically what John would have become. But since he has his power, and since he has a different outlet of releasing this kind of anger through kind of fighting instead of what I just said, it would turned badly if he didn't have powers. I'm just saying, because you have a person with no powers in a world of powers, he has no really way to defend himself without a weapon. So it could have ended pretty badly. But John himself, I think, is a pretty well-written character. He is sympathetical, but I do think a lot of the things that he does is wrong. and I don't think you are a bad person for sympathizing or even somewhat agreeing with John in some cases. So he's a lot like the Joker, at least the 2019 version, in that regard. So let's go over some things I like. Like I said before, I really like John's character, the slow transition from this kind of nice person you think into this kind of ruthless kind of character with violent tendencies, the slow transition, the kind of hints with the kind of color of the dialogue, as well as his kind of change in hairstyle, right? That's very interesting throughout the series, that you see those little hints, especially with the kind of dark backstory that no one wants to talk about until it's finally revealed. That's very interesting for a character like this. A main character that isn't morally right, that's morally gray. You don't see that in a lot of, typical webtoons, or at least you don't see that in a lot of manga, right? It's usually in these kind of battle kind of comics or manga or webtoons, the main character is usually righteous in some sort of way, but it's interesting to see a morally gray character, especially someone like John, who's been put down by the society, who can't, he can't be in power, but he also can't be without power, because either way he's discriminated against. So that's very interesting to have a kind of character like that. Also, what I like is the kind of this idea that John has about people in power, with the kind of how people are fake and things like that, because you see that throughout the kind of the webtoon. They would do things to John one day, and like, let's say, like, John gets beat up pretty harshly throughout this entire webtoon, especially at the beginning. He literally gets his arm broken nearly every day. There's this one scene with I believe his name is Aizen. I believe that's his name. He has the hunter ability. He literally breaks John's wrist and he smiles while doing it. And ever since then, he treats John nicely, but that's not really because he regrets what he did. He's doing that because he fears John and what he could do. And John, every time Aizen's trying to be nice to him, he always brings up this fact that, you literally broke my wrist. Like, I'm not going to trust you, right? And John is kind of a petty person in some instances. Most of the time he is justifiable in the fact that he has hatred for a lot of these characters, but like parts like, I think it was Blake who shot a kind of laser at him. It was near him, but it wasn't like directly, he wasn't going to shoot him, right? And John always brings this up, but Blake always tells him, like, what would you do if someone hit your friend, right? And John never really answers this question. He kind of deflects. A lot of times John deflects the question, he deflects the question by trying to justify his actions every time. And that's very interesting to his character, which I really like. Another thing I like is the art style. It's not the best. It's not the best well drawn, but I do kind of like the art style. It is kind of simple, but it does look nice for what it is, and it is full color, so that's a more of an experience that you get, especially things with the color text, like I said, the kind of transition. So another thing I like is the other characters. I like the kind of hierarchy that they have, especially how cruel it is, right? With the crueler kind of society that they have, it justifies the main character's actions more and makes them more sympathetical and things like that. The overall kind of story with John finally showing his powers is a really nice kind of transition, and I really do like that. But I'll get into stuff that I don't like, or I like right now. So what I don't really like is I guess the side story with Ember, the kind of Ember group, and Remy's kind of brother Ray dying because of it. Like, I understand, like, this character is a very important character, especially to the kind of backstory of the world or the high school that they go to, but it's just kind of boring, because when this part released, or this kind of mini story arc, this came out at the same time as John kind of unlocking his powers. So when, as a reader, you're looking at this and like, I don't care, I want to get back to John, I want to see what he does, right? Because John said something very cryptic, or not cryptic, very foreshadowing to Arlo, which is the king of the school, quote unquote. They have this kind of system in where the top ranks are the kind of leaders of the school, and it goes by the kind of cards of a poker, or of a set of cards, like the face cards as well as the ace, right? So he basically says, if you tell anyone my secret, then I'll dethrone you, right? That's like great storytelling right there, right? It foreshadows and also gives this threat to a very powerful character that we've known, and it actually puts fear into him, right? And then we switch over to Remy trying to become a vigilante and trying to find the members of Ember, right? And I didn't really care for it. I was more interested in John and his story rather than that. Like I said before, I understand the kind of plot relevance, but it doesn't really amount to anything. Yeah, she becomes a vigilante. She does some questioning. She meets a member of Ember, but then a person dies, and then they get beat up by the Ember person, and they basically give up. Or they're forced to give up, and nothing really comes of it, other than the fact that they know, a character from the group. Another thing I don't like is that they keep using the same kind of references. Like, they keep saying authorities instead of like anything specific. They just say, oh, the authorities that, the authority this, and things like that. Right? They never say anything specific. Another thing is that they say that, your power determines your usefulness to society, right? But they never give an example of how it's useful to society, right? They say that more powerful people go, like people with more powerful abilities go in higher positions, but they never really talk about how your power contributes to society in any way, especially since this world doesn't have superheroes. So how can your power improve society if you're not using it to fight crime, right? They could have given some examples, like, I don't know, people with healing quirks could go and become doctors, or not healing quirks, healing powers can go and become doctors, but they never give any example like that, right? Even the nurse at the school, his power does not have to do anything with healing. His power is called Nightmare, right? It has nothing to do with healing. He's just someone that's smart, and yeah, it's just really weird how they keep referencing things like this, but they never really explain it. And they could have just shown us one or two examples, and I wouldn't be really talking about this. So that's kind of the main things I don't like about it. I guess another thing I do like is how most of these have to do with John, because John's just such an amazing character. But how the author wrote it so that John is basically forced to use his power more and more often, especially when Sarah basically loses her powers, right? So he can't really depend on her kind of losing her or using her powers to defend him, which he never really depended on anyways. But he gets beat up more because of it. And not only that, but because Sarah used to be high ranking and now is low, basically a cripple, she is now targeted for harassment and bullying, and John can't really do much about it until he becomes the Joker. And I don't mean the Joker as in like DC, like he becomes a Joker as in like a card, right? There's always a Joker in a deck of cards, and he's kind of that wild card like the Joker should be. And they kind of foreshadowed this beforehand in earlier parts where his father was at home with him and they were playing poker, and they had to restart because they left the Joker in, right? So that's basically, it's foreshadowing him becoming the Joker and basically toppling over the hierarchy that was already pre-established. So that was a nice nod to that. So when he becomes a Joker, he becomes very ruthless and dons a mask so no one knows his identity, and basically beats up all the royals that are there. So that's the king, queen, and what else was it? Ace? No, the ace isn't there. The jack and things like that. So I think the author is really smart in the ways of how she's able to kind of justify everything and make it make sense. Because, like I said before, this type of character is kind of not hard to write, but it can be somewhat easy to fall back on making him bad, I guess. Making him just straight up evil, or even make everything that happens to him just random chance, right? So that's what I really like about it. And yeah, I guess I could also talk about the kind of book that's in the webtoon called Unordinary, which John's father wrote. And what it is a story about this person who lives in a world of cripples, and he's the only one who has powers. And he basically uses the powers to save people. So it's a superhero tale that's really foreign to their world, because there aren't superheroes, right? And most people use their powers for selfish reasons. So it is a very kind of challenging book in terms of the kind of mindset that the world has. And so much, in fact, that it actually gets banned, right? And people can actually get in a lot of trouble for having this, right? And they have this like an entire kind of re-education system that's been used before, particularly on like high tiers, especially people like John, right? He was taught to basically fear his powers, right? And I won't get into too much because I don't want to spoil it. The kind of main stuff that is worth your time reading. So yeah, I'm gonna end it here. I'm gonna give it a score. I really do like this. I think it's a great system, or a great kind of story. And the power system could use some work, since a lot of the powers seem like the rehashes of others. But other than that, it is this kind of superpowered kind of world. And I wish there was more stories about superheroes and things like that. So I'm gonna give it an 8 out of 10. Like I said in my other reviews, you can go check them out to see how my score system works. And yeah, with that being said, this is gonna be the end of the video. So yeah,